Imagine dedicating your entire life to a cause so powerful that it changes the course of human history forever. Now imagine that same devotion leading you down paths of persecution, exile, and even death. This isn't fiction. This is the untold story of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. But here's the question that most people never stop to ask. What really happened to them after the resurrection? We often hear their names in passing: Peter, John, James, Matthew. But their final chapters are rarely explored. Did they continue spreading Jesus' message peacefully? Were they hunted down? Did they die as martyrs, or simply fade into history? The truth is, far more intense and far more human than most people expect. After the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, these 12 men were no longer just followers. They became leaders of a movement that was growing rapidly and dangerously. Christianity was not accepted at the time. In fact, it was seen as a threat to political and religious authority. And that made the apostles targets. Each of them took a different path. Some traveled across continents, preaching to strangers in unfamiliar lands. Others stayed closer to their origins, building the foundations of early Christian communities. But one thing united them all: an unshakable conviction that what they had witnessed was worth everything. And here's where things get even more fascinating. Many of the apostles are believed to have faced brutal endings. Not because they failed, but because they refused to deny what they believed. Their stories are filled with courage, sacrifice, and a level of faith that still inspires billions today. But how much of what we've heard is actually true? And how much has been shaped by legend over the centuries? In this video, we're going to uncover the mysteries, the historical accounts, and the shocking realities behind the fate of each apostle. Some stories will challenge what you think you know. Others might leave you speechless. Because this isn't just about how they died, it's about how they lived and what their choices reveal about belief, purpose, and legacy. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely change the way you see these iconic figures, maybe even yourself. And if you're ready to explore stories that history doesn't always tell in full, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join this journey with us. Now let's begin where it all started. To understand what truly happened to the apostles, we need to start with one of the most prominent figures among them, Peter. Peter wasn't just another follower, he was often seen as the leader of the group. Bold, impulsive, and deeply devoted. He was the one who famously declared his loyalty to Jesus, and also the one who denied him 3 times. That contradiction alone already makes his story incredibly human. But what happened after everything changed? According to early Christian tradition, Peter became a central figure in spreading the message of Jesus, especially in Rome, the heart of the Roman Empire. This was no small mission. Rome was powerful, politically charged, and deeply resistant to anything that threatened its structure. Preaching about a risen Messiah, that was dangerous territory. And yet, Peter didn't stop. As the movement grew, so did the opposition. Christians were increasingly seen as rebels, even enemies of the state. And during the reign of Emperor Nero, persecution reached terrifying levels. Believers were arrested, tortured, and executed in brutal ways. Peter was among them. Historical accounts suggest that Peter was sentenced to death by crucifixion, but here's the detail that makes his story unforgettable. He reportedly requested to be crucified upside down. Why? Because he felt unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't just fear or submission. It was a powerful statement of humility, conviction, and identity. Peter, once the man who denied Jesus out of fear, now chose a death that reflected unwavering faith. And he wasn't the only one. James, the son of Zebedee, one of the closest to Jesus, became the first apostle to be executed. According to the book of Acts, he was killed by the sword under King Herod Agrippa. No long trial, no dramatic speech, just a swift and decisive end. But that raises a question that few people consider. If these men knew the risks, if they saw what was happening to others, why didn't they run? Why didn't they go into hiding or simply stop preaching? The answer might be the most compelling part of this entire story. Because whatever they experienced, whatever they witnessed after the resurrection, it was powerful enough to erase fear. And as we move forward, the stories only become more intense, more mysterious, and in some cases, more uncertain. So keep watching, because what happened next to the other apostles will take us far beyond Rome, into lands, legends, and sacrifices that history still struggles to fully explain. And if you're finding this journey as fascinating as it sounds, don't forget to subscribe and be part of this exploration, because we're just getting started. As we move beyond Rome, the story of the apostles becomes even more complex, stretching across continents, cultures, and centuries of tradition. And this is where history and mystery begin to intertwine. Take Thomas, for example, often remembered as doubting Thomas, but that label barely scratches the surface of who he became. According to ancient accounts, Thomas traveled farther than any of the other apostles, reaching as far as India. Think about that. In a time without modern transportation, without maps as we know them today, he journeyed thousands of miles to share a message that many were willing to die for. But here's the question: what drives someone to go that far, knowing the risks? In India, Thomas is believed to have established Christian communities that still exist today. His influence was so profound that generations later, people would trace their faith back to his mission. But his story doesn't end in peace. Tradition says he was martyred, killed by spears, for refusing to stop preaching. And then there's Andrew, the brother of Peter. Andrew's path took him through regions like Greece and possibly parts of Eastern Europe. Like his brother, he faced intense opposition, and, like many of the apostles, his end was violent. He is said to have been crucified on an X-shaped cross, now often called St. Andrew's Cross. But what's even more striking is that, according to tradition, he didn't die immediately. He reportedly continued preaching to those around him for days while hanging there. Can you imagine that level of endurance? That level of belief? But not all stories are equally clear. Bartholomew, for instance, is surrounded by accounts that are as fascinating as they are unsettling. Some traditions claim he preached in Armenia and was executed in one of the most brutal ways imaginable, flayed alive. Others offer different versions of his fate, leaving historians to debate what truly happened. And that brings us to a crucial point. Not everything we know about the apostles comes from direct historical records. Much of it has been passed down through oral tradition, writings from early church leaders, and cultural memory. So how do we separate fact from legend? Maybe we don't entirely. Because whether every detail is historically precise or not, the consistency of one theme is undeniable. These men were willing to go to the ends of the earth and face unimaginable suffering for what they believed to be true. And as we approach the final chapter of this story, the remaining apostles will challenge us even more, not just with how they died, but with the legacy they left behind. So stay with me, because the conclusion of this journey might leave you questioning not just their fate, but the power of belief itself. And if you've made it this far, this is your moment. Subscribe to the channel and join a community that dives deep into the stories that shape our world. Because the final revelations are coming next, and you won't want to miss them. As we reach the final chapter of this journey, we're left with the remaining apostles' figures whose stories are just as powerful. Even when history becomes less certain, consider John, often known as the beloved disciple. Unlike many of the others, John is believed to have died of old age, but that doesn't mean his life was free from suffering. Early accounts suggest he was exiled to the island of Patmos, where he lived in isolation. It was there that he is said to have received the visions recorded in the book of Revelation, a text filled with symbolism, warning, and hope. Now ask yourself, what kind of experiences shape a mind to write something so profound, so intense? Then there's Matthew, the former tax collector turned apostle. His transformation alone is remarkable, from a man associated with corruption to one of the key figures spreading a message of redemption. Tradition holds that he traveled to regions like Ethiopia or Persia, where he ultimately faced martyrdom. Once again, the details vary, but the pattern remains: faith, mission, sacrifice. James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, also known as Jude, and Simon the Zealot. These apostles are perhaps the most mysterious. Historical records about them are limited, and much of what we know comes from later traditions. Some accounts claim they preached in places like Syria, Persia, and North Africa. Others suggest they were martyred in pairs, facing opposition wherever they went. And then there's one name that stands apart from all the others: Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed Jesus. Unlike the others, Judas' story takes a different turn, one marked by regret, guilt, and tragedy. According to the gospel accounts, he died shortly after his betrayal, unable to live with what he had done. So what does all of this mean? 12 men. 12 different paths. Some stories clear, others uncertain, but all connected by a single moment in history that changed everything. Here's the deeper quest, the one that stays with us long after the details fade. What kind of truth inspires people, not just to live differently, but to die for it? Whether you see these accounts as history, tradition, or faith, the impact of the apostles is undeniable. Their actions helped shape one of the largest belief systems in the world today. But beyond religion, their stories speak to something universal: the search for purpose, the courage to stand firm, and the legacy we choose to leave behind. Because in the end, it's not just about how they died, it's about what they believed was worth living and dying for. So now I leave you with this. What do you believe in strongly enough to stand for, no matter the cost? If this story made you think, reflect, or see things differently, make sure to subscribe to the channel and be part of more journeys like this, because sometimes looking back at history is the only way to truly understand ourselves.